1990s, the Dallas Cowboys, also known as America's team, emerged from years of mediocrity and irrelevance to establish one of the most dominant NFL dynasties of the modern era. On the field, the team was absolutely loaded with Hall of Fame talent. But as explosive as the 1990s Cowboys were on the field, they were even more explosive off the field. And they were loaded off the field too. This was a team that worked hard and played harder, way harder. By all accounts, Michael Irvin was the ringleader of the Cowboys' off-field activities, which can only be described as pure, unadulterated hedonism. But there was a number of players who spent pretty much all their free time drinking, doing drugs, and getting laid in new and interesting ways. Of course the team looked the other way as long as the results on the field were there. But after a few years, the Cowboys' hard-partying ways caught up to them, and results on the field started to slip. After winning 12 games in their third Super Bowl in 1995, the Cowboys' win total slipped to 10 games in 1996 and just 6 in 1997. Then came the insane locker room fight in 1998 that many say was the dagger that killed the Cowboys dynasty. Now, the world of pro sports has seen a number of pretty crazy fights between teammates over the years. Jarvis Crittenden pointed a loaded gun at Gilbert Arenas in the Washington Wizards locker room in December of 2009. Shaquille O'Neal choked Gordon Giricek unconscious in the Suns locker room in April of 2008 before a game. Bobby Portis broke Nikola Mirotic's face after a Bulls practice in October of 2017. But none of those incidents quite compare to the senselessness and brutality of what transpired at the Dallas Cowboys training camp on July 29, 1998, when superstar wide receiver Michael Irvin nearly murdered one of his own teammates over a haircut. To understand how the Cowboys' 90s dynasty imploded in such spectacular and horrifying fashion, you really have to go all the way back to the beginning. The Dallas Cowboys came into the NFL as an expansion franchise in 1960. They didn't win a single game that year, and they didn't do a whole lot of winning in the 5 years after that, going just 25-42 during that span. However, everything changed in 1966. That year, the Cowboys went 10-3 and reached the NFL championship game, and Tom Landry was named Coach of the Year. That was just the beginning. Over the course of 20 seasons from 1966 to 1985, the Dallas Cowboys made 18 playoff appearances, won 13 division titles, reached the NFC Championship game 11 times, reached the Super Bowl 5 times, and won the Super Bowl twice. Other teams like the Steelers and Raiders may have won more championships during that stretch, but no other team maintained such an incredibly high level of excellence over that entire time. It truly is one of the most dominant runs in the history of American pro sports, and it's part of the reason the Dallas Cowboys became known as America's team. The other reason why the Dallas Cowboys became known as America's team had nothing to do with actual football. While the team was out on the field winning games in the 1960s and 70s, the front office was coming up with unique ways to entertain fans and make money. Thanks to expansive merchandising and their world-famous scantily clad cheerleading squad, not to mention their pioneering use of luxury boxes when the old Texas Stadium opened up in 1971, after just 15 years of existence, the Dallas Cowboys brand was number one, not just in the NFL, but in all of sports. Unfortunately, in the mid-1980s, the Cowboys' performance on the field started to slip. After getting blown out by the Rams in the first round of the 1985 playoffs, the Cowboys finished below 500 in each of the next 3 seasons. And by 1988, when they finished just 3-13, fans were fed up. They said that America's team had lost its swagger. But things were about to change big time. In 1988, Cowboys owner Harvey Bright sold the team for $140 million to a brash, outspoken oilman from Arkansas named Jerry Jones. Jones immediately made a huge splash by unceremoniously firing living legend Tom Landry, the only coach the Cowboys had ever had in their 29 years of existence. He replaced Landry with his old teammate from the University of Arkansas, Miami Hurricanes coach Jimmy Johnson. Then, Jones fired longtime general manager Tex Schramm and took that job himself. With Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson running the show, the entire Dallas Cowboys organization was oozing arrogance and swagger. All they had to do now was go out and get results to match their egos. In 1989, Jones and Johnson selected UCLA quarterback Troy Aikman with the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. Then they selected Florida running back Emmitt Smith with the 17th pick in 1990. All-Pro tackle Eric Williams with the 70th pick in 1991, and All-Pro safety Darren Woodson with the 37th pick in 1992. The Cowboys acquired a lot of young talent in a short amount of time. and all of a sudden the Cowboys roster was loaded. In 1989, the first year of the Jerry Jones-Jimmy Johnson era, the Cowboys went 1-15. However, in 1992, they went 13-3, outscoring playoff opponents 117-37, en route to what would be the first of 3 Super Bowl championships in 4 seasons. Just 4 years after Jerry Jones fired Tom Landry, the Dallas Cowboys were juggernauts, standing on top of the football world. However, there was a downside to the Cowboys' new winning culture. From the beginning, Jones and Johnson had encouraged their guys to play with an edge and embraced the idea that they were better than everyone else because they were Dallas Cowboys. And they were perfectly happy to look the other way as their guys engaged in behavior a lot of people would consider downright deviant. But things started to go off the rails when Charles Haley joined the team in 1992. Haley, a 2-time Super Bowl champion with the 49ers, had a notorious reputation around the NFL. The 49ers traded him to the Cowboys because they were sick of his so-called volatile temperament. Haley's fellow teammates just thought he was nuts. In reality, Haley had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. However, he didn't take his medication with any regularity, and that resulted in some extreme behavior. Legend has it that on his first day as a Dallas Cowboy, Charles Haley walked into a conference room for a team video session wearing nothing but a towel. Then, when the film started rolling, Haley lied down on the floor, removed his towel, and began pleasuring himself. And, like a match made in heaven, it was only natural that Haley got along well with Michael Irvin, who was also a man of extremes. The stories of Irvin's life off the gridiron are the stuff that's made of legend. He was a man who did nothing in moderation. Irvin guzzled booze, smoked weed, and snorted coke like they were going out of style. When it came to partying, he was the Cowboys' ringleader, and his primary responsibility, rustling up droves of women who wanted to sleep with America's team. How serious was Michael Irvin about partying? Well, he rented a house in the Dallas suburbs just so he and his teammates would have a place to party and hook up with groupies. They called their pad the White House, and there were allegedly video cameras in every room to capture the debauchery that went on. Throughout the early 90s, the Dallas Cowboys burned the candle at both ends and somehow managed to keep winning. However, eventually the excessive partying took its toll. At least 3 players were suspended by the NFL for failing multiple drug tests, and lineman Eric Williams nearly killed himself in a drunk driving accident that cut his career short. The pinnacle of the Cowboys' brash, unapologetic debauchery came in 1996, when roughly a dozen players hired limos to drive their mistresses to Arizona for Super Bowl 30. The downfall began in earnest about a month later. Michael Irvin was just off a 3rd championship and the best regular season of his Hall of Fame career, one in which he recorded 111 receptions for 1,603 yards and 10 touchdowns. However, he'd been flying way too close to the sun for way too long, and this time he came crashing down to earth. On March 4th, 1996, Irvin and former Cowboys tight end Alfredo Roberts were arrested in a Texas motel room with 2 prostitutes, 10 grams of cocaine, over an ounce of marijuana, and a bunch of other drug paraphernalia and sex toys. The first words out of Irvin's mouth when the cops showed up, "Do you know who I am?" Of course, just about any other player would have copped a plea deal, avoided jail time, and kept the situation as quiet as possible. But not Irvin. He thought he was untouchable, so he pled not guilty. Then, he intimidated and threatened a key witness for the prosecution, whose husband, a Dallas cop, in turn hired a hitman to kill Irvin. As if all that weren't enough, when the case finally went to trial, Irvin showed up to court looking like a pimp in a full-length fur coat. He was swagged out, bruh. Michael Irvin turned what could have been a quiet case into an absolute circus. In the end, Irvin finally wised up and made a deal, but the NFL suspended Irvin 4 games in 1997 for violating the league's drug policy, and Irvin still hadn't learned his lesson. He was spiraling out of control, which brings us, finally, to the time he almost murdered one of his teammates. The incident took place at the Dallas Cowboys training camp dorm on July 29, 1998. As a perk for the players, the team would hire a Dallas barber to set up shop every day at training camp and give players free haircuts. Players would sit around and shoot the breeze while they waited for their turn, just like they would at a regular barbershop. But on this day, things would go horribly wrong. Everett McIver, a 6'5", 325-pound offensive lineman, had just sat down in the chair and been fitted with a barber's cape when Michael Irvin strutted in. Other players in the room at the time thought he seemed moody and agitated. One thing that's absolutely clear is that Irvin wanted a haircut and he didn't think he should have to wait for anybody. So Irvin screamed seniority at Everett McIver. When McIver didn't budge, Irvin screamed it again. And when McIver still didn't budge, Irvin screamed it over and over before finally telling McIver to get the F out of his chair. At that point, McIver clapped back, telling Irvin that he was almost done and to give him another few minutes. Irvin didn't like that. Quote, "Benny, get this mother out the chair," he told the barber. "Tell this pathetic ass to wait his turn. Either I get cut right now or nobody does." At that point, Eric Williams jumped in and told McIver, "Don't you dare get out of that chair." Realizing that something bad was about to go down, Benny, the barber, slowly backed away. Then McIver stood up and shoved Irvin in the chest. That's when all hell broke loose. Irvin shoved McIver back and McIver tossed Irvin across the room against the wall. Leon Lett stepped in and tried to separate the two, but it was no use, and McIver punched Irvin right in the kisser. That's when Irvin lost it. He grabbed a pair of scissors with his right hand, reached back, and slashed McIver across the neck, just above the collarbone, right below the carotid artery. Immediately, blood started shooting all over the room. It was like a scene out of a movie. Players were shocked, and for a moment, there was complete silence. Then team medical staff rushed into the room to attend to McIver before he was taken away in an ambulance. For a good period of time, nobody knew the extent of McIver's injury. For all they knew, they just witnessed a murder. Luckily, McIver didn't die that day, but the Dallas Cowboys did. Jerry Jones might have been able to save the team if he had done the right thing, if he'd called the police and cut Michael Irvin. But that's not what he did. That's how the Dallas Cowboys operated. They were above everything and everyone. So Jones just threw a bunch of money at McIver in exchange for his silence and promised not to press charges. And the team tried to go on like nothing happened. But something had happened. It couldn't be ignored. The Cowboys went on to win 10 games in 1998, but the team was a shell of its former self, and they lost to the 9-7 Cardinals in the wild card playoffs. In the 19 years since then, they've made the playoffs just 7 times, winning just 2 games. And fans now wonder if they'll ever be America's team again.